Good morning, and thank you so much for being here. Today, I have been given and I've voluntarily taken the responsibility to share my reflections from the book Words of Long Ago. This is from the essay from 21st May 1912. We're talking about impersonal work and how can impersonal work help us in our personal and collective growth. So that's the puzzle that I will share my reflections. And these are based on the writings of the mother and the thoughts that they triggered in me. So there's a lot of my reflections in this, and it's sharing from that perspective. And from the perspective of psychology, which is my field, organizational psychology, and counseling, which is my field. And how I sometimes find these spiritual teachings of 1912 tell us things that we just forgot. Instead of words of long ago, it's words forgotten long ago. So, thank you. So, essentially, when we look at the term impersonal work, and these are from Mother's Playground Talks, and can work be impersonal? We start in psychology, we say work is your identity. It's your way of connecting to the world. It's your role identity. In a playground, when my kids were also small and we would have interactions with other parents. So one of the parents, the co-parents, her son must have been just entering school. So she told me, I'm going to put him, his birthday is end of April. So the admission rules are that, the child should have turned 3 or 4 the previous month. So he says 13, 14 days mein ek pura saal, 1 whole year he should not miss out. I'm going to find a school which takes him in a previous class earlier, because when he reaches grade 12, he's going to drop a year and give his engineering exam. And there was that merry-go-round in which we were swinging both our kids, and I think I missed a swing. So work is very personal. It starts literally from the time you're born to the families you're in, the kind of roles you see around you, and it becomes part of your identity. And what do we see work as? Work should give me money. Work should give me social standing. Work should give me respect. I should have a good lifestyle. And all of this is what work gives me. And the mother talks about impersonal work. So what is that? What is impersonal work? Well, the truth is we are all doing impersonal work. We just haven't used that term. How many of you have volunteered in school, in college, in any social or spiritual organization, given your time? We do it. We do it because we feel joy. Sometimes we choose what we want to do and we say, yeah, I like that. I'm going to spend some time doing that. And we do it because in that moment when we are doing that, we are in the flow. We are not thinking, am I competing? Am I doing well? Will I get my marks? Will my boss see me and give me a promotion when I do this well? And I think that is the essence of a part of the meaning that I derive about impersonal work here. That work which is not done for any personal benefit. It's done not because we want to elevate ourselves financially, socially, economically, personally. It's a form of expression. It's something that we offer to the world because it just seems like That's a gift we may have. That's a skill we may have. Or maybe we just enjoy and learn in the process. So the mother says that if you want to grow to the point where you want to follow your purpose and passion, and these are big words, and we're all lost on these big terms because we are so used to working instrumentally for something. She recommends that start with spending a little time, if possible, every day, doing something which doesn't give you any personal benefit or gain. And we've all done that. Look back. We've all done that in school, we've done that in colleges. We just haven't given it that term. Now, let me tell you, if it was so easy that we've all done impersonal work, we've all done voluntary work, and hence we shall grow, then why doesn't it happen more often? Let's go back to our everyday anecdotes. Let's look at what happens in an everyday context. So back in early 2000s, and I will just share my personal anecdotes, and the effort is it might ring a bell somewhere, and I would love it if you can also share that. So we are in a new apartment complex, there are lots of people, and there becomes this social engagement of, okay, everybody knows probably how to cook one dish well. Each family bring one dish and let's do a potluck outside. Simple, everyday thing. Everybody is very joyful. People are making whatever they are good at. The Mrs. Guptas and the Mrs. Sahanis and the Mrs. Subramaniams and the Mrs. Anands are all sharing information. Why did I say all Mrs.? The Misters also. Let's be fair. We have enough chefs. What happened? We went, we shared. And then somebody said, let's turn this into a competition. Whose dish is the best next time? The flavor of sharing changed. Because now we introduce this element of a competition, which means one is better than the other, which means that we are trying to elevate ourselves or extend our ego boundaries by creating that dish. And what happened is there was tension. What is she making? What is that household making? There is competition, and you sense stress instead of joy in the air. This is obstacle number one. When we are trying to do impersonal work, and move it towards something that will give us a lot of personal growth, we tend to get caught in our own obstacles of wanting to bring in social standing, bring in energies towards us, making ourselves the center of something. Look back, any office function you organized, any drawing competition that was done in the society, anything that we did in school, in college, a festival, what may have started as a simple concept of just sharing, when it gets repeated and it gets so-called systematized, and if it's not done with that thing of, okay, I'm just doing it to express, I'm just doing it for my best, then it stops being a channel of growth. And we have people who opt out and say, no, this was fun before, but it's not fun anymore. And the mother says very beautifully that this is human nature. We are manifestations. And the moment we have a physical manifestation, it can't be perfect. And this is one of our imperfections. So why did we start with doing impersonal work? So we can grow. We can become conscious of many things that we are not aware of. We can align or commune with the universe. We can grow in consciousness. We start doing it, and then our own limitations become obstacles. And it is exactly that obstacle that we want to circumvent and overpower. So it becomes a little bit of a cycle. I'll quote. She says, "What is the greatest obstacle in ourselves to our consecration to impersonal work? Regarded from the most general point of view, this obstacle is indistinguishable from the very reason for the work to be accomplished. It is the present state of imperfection of physical matter. Matter is imperfect. So, the very fact that it incarnates in a physical body gives rise to obstacles. And what are these obstacles? The first one is an unconscious need for identification with the whole, or what we call taking the illusion of personality to its extreme. So, what's happening in each of these voluntary services? Each person is trying to feel more important after a point in time. And the moment that starts dominating, the beauty of that impersonal seva or voluntary service goes. So basically, she says that as a result, in proportion to our intellectual or physical strength, so see this, we have people who may be very, very, with degrees. And then we'll have people who are very, very high in terms of their business or their financial power. Let's say all of them form a group. That group doesn't have any structure to start with. They're all trying to probably do something, maybe do something for the residents, the RWA, the famous RWA politics that some of us may have experienced. What happens there? It's all voluntary. But the moment different people with different backgrounds, with different levels of intellectual or physical power come together, that same structure starts getting imposed. And the reason we got together to do an impersonal service or seva gets diluted. And then sometimes people like me will say, "Oh no, this is too much tension, let's go. I just came to do my bit. I can't handle all this." Our obstacle. Because we haven't acknowledged that this is the path. To know that these obstacles will come, that we are human, that as long as something is in physical matter and it's manifesting, it's on a journey, that when we are in a group, each of us at that point will vary in our vibrations and our soul consciousness. And it is actually our opportunity to extend ourselves and do what we can as an offering. That gets lost. And where that continues to be there, the seva bhav is beautiful. You go and you say, "I just did langar seva, or I just cleaned the floors, and man, did I feel this soulful experience inside." There is something in the air of that place. I shared a lot. Any reflections here? Did I take you through that journey of you having volunteered and what obstacle you may have seen when you tried to volunteer or do something out of your role, out of your scope, out of the goodness of your heart, because you want to make an impact and make a difference? I see some smiles and some nods. And I'm reassured in the fact that the obstacle is not just mine. It's here and it's all of us. And then when this happens, we give up sometimes. Sometimes impersonal work is not just seva or voluntary service. Sometimes it is the heart with which we do our work. And by that, what I have seen is, let's take again an everyday example. We've all had virals, flus. We go to a doctor. There are some doctors who look at us clinically, eyes, pulse, heartbeat. 2 minutes, prescription, go. And then there are those who will make eye contact, who will probably say one or two calming and relieving words. And just in that interaction, you go back at least feeling a little better. You're put on that cycle of healing. Work which gives the person commercial benefits, social status, standing, but done from the heart. And hence that impersonal, that part of the personal touch is what makes it more gratifying for us. And when you have to go back to a doctor, which doctor will you go back to? The one who says, symptoms, go, or the one who sits down and spends 2-3 minutes at least talking to you amidst all the madness and the rush? So sometimes we say impersonal work can only be voluntary. I have learned that it can happen in the here and now. It can happen in what we are doing by just doing it with the heart. And when we do it with the heart, then we feel joy, don't we? It's not mechanical. We're not doing it just for the salary or just for the paycheck. We're doing it because we enjoy it. We're doing it because our work is making a difference. Then what does that do to us? We grow. Our vibrations start changing. We start feeling more fulfilled. I'll give you one more example. I was stuck in Kerala with a dental problem. I had gone visiting, and it was very painful. So I had to visit a dentist, and someone referred me somewhere. I went, and I saw that in his clinic, he's very calm, composed. There's a lot of crowd. One by one, he's meeting everybody. He's telling them what needs to be done, and everybody is going. People are waiting, sometimes for up to 2 hours for their turn. Now, I had neglected my dental problem because I had consulted a dentist bang in the middle of a metropolitan city, and he gave me this inflated prescription, inflated set of procedures, and an inflated bill, and I wasn't sure if all of that I needed or wanted. Next year, I went back to that dentist in Kerala to get my procedures done. The trust, the healing, the faith that we build in human beings comes from giving your heart, giving a little bit more, or making work your offering. Now, if we can do that, and the mother says, yes, we will face obstacles. And the obstacle is exactly this. Okay, if I have to do this, then this person is seeing 10 clients in a day and I am doing only 3. You see? The growth aspect, the structure aspect, it comes in. And it's natural because we are living in this world. And if we are living in this world, we are imperfect. And if we are imperfect, then we are on a path to growth. And if we are on a path to growth, then we will face obstacles. It's not going to happen without them. I guess for me, the learning is don't give up. There will be obstacles. Keep walking. See what you learned. See where I had to give up my attachment to a structure or a position. Move forward. Now, let's say there is this one individual who's doing their work with this complete seva bhav. Highly impersonal, either a voluntary service or their work, whatever they are earning from. That person has shifted mentally, shifted emotionally, shifted psychologically, shifted in the way they spend money, shifted in the way they relate to their work. A lot of things are shifting inside. That's growth. But what's happening around? Sometimes the environment will help us. Sometimes it will say, what are you doing? You've changed so much. Come, sit, it's Friday evening. Let's party. What are you doing? And then we wonder, what are we doing? Why are we shifting so much? And then we find that we might just fall back into our comfort zone, literally, which is where we started. Which is why we started this whole exercise of doing something impersonal or doing it with the heart. And the moment we find that we are not able to break those barriers, you see, the moment you do something, there's somebody trying to uplift you. The universe, the spiritual energy is trying to uplift you. We are not receptive to that. We get back into our comfort zone. We become very rigid and we say, no, this is the way of the world. No, no, no. And that's it. Then we are boxed in again. So she says the second tendency, which is in fact a normal consequence of the first, is an excessively conservative spirit. A fixity of the whole nature, intellectual, moral, and physical, which makes it impossible for us to transform ourselves as rapidly as we should in order to be always in harmony with the law of universal progress. So we want to progress. We start making steps to progress. We find there are obstacles in us, outside. We stop, sometimes we give up. Let's say we sustain. Tough one. Let's say we sustain. We raise our own understanding, our own awareness, our own vibrations. And then we see that, oh my God, what all is changing? My whole perspective has changed. Am I on the right track? What am I doing? That rigidity, that tamas, so to speak, pulls us back. And sometimes it's the fear of, if I were to grow, or if somebody were to grow or elevate themselves, then what becomes individually theirs? Because the next step is that if you have gained that awareness, wow, then the next step is to give, to share. And we come back to our own ego boundaries of self-preservation, that if I share so much, then what happens to me? I won't be different enough. I won't be unique enough. Everybody said that you have to be this unique person who's going to have unique sets of goals or objectives that you need to meet up with. So that becomes the next journey, which is we fear. We fear that if we share too much, we don't do our duty of becoming the link who just pours whatever is flowed into our cup onto the next, because it's only flown into our cup, it's not ours. We forget that. We've received it, well, we need to give it forward. There are multitudes of examples, and I'll share a snippet. I keep looking at people who've done career transformations or journeys, or people who've realigned their careers, because that's very relevant to my work. And once when I was skimming over the newspaper, I came across this article of a football coach who in his free time coaches children for football in the stadium. He's a banker otherwise. So he does his 9-to-5 job and he loves football. He could never play in his times. His parents never encouraged him. He's very good at it. He would like to transfer that skill to the youngsters and help the parents also nurture their football talent, something he never got. Grown, impersonal work, beautiful. Now, when somebody approaches him saying, you're doing this great job, I want to do it in my area. Can you help me? So I met this other football enthusiast who's in his 30s, who also wants to do something similar, but in another part of the city. What do you think happened? He said, oh, I featured in the newspaper because I'm unique. I'm a banker. I'm giving my skills and my time to train children. And so I featured. I learned a lot. I can teach. But if there are 100 more football coaches in the city as a result of this, because the chain will expand, then I'm no different, right? And this is the place where the word collective consciousness comes. Isn't it great if we have 100 football coaches who are training children after school, pro bono or impersonally? The challenge that this coach experienced when he was a young child, he wouldn't have faced if there were those 100 coaches. So, impersonal work becomes the pathway to personal and collective growth. Because the more you give, the more you grow, the more you grow and you've given, the people around you have received it and they have grown. And it's that chain. It's what everybody calls, even in management philosophy. You call it a waterfall effect, you call it the flow chart, you call it anything. It's a chain. And here she says really nicely, she says that we must be a link in the chain. The link does not grow bigger at the expense of its neighbors. And this is the critical piece that is missing in business these days, or even in families, or even in setups. We're trying to constantly grow bigger at the expense of the other. And a large part of the mess the world is in is because of this. But when it faithfully transmits the current it has received, it will receive another. And the more complete and swift its transmission, the more it will be brought into contact with a great number of forces or things for it to use or manifest. Essentially, she's saying you don't need to fear anything. You have a skill, transfer. The moment you transfer, there will be the universe to support you. You will grow. The world grows around you. And isn't that why we are all trying to practice or imbibe spirituality, so that we can grow our consciousness and the consciousness of the world around us? And then she says very beautifully, but we say na that we are unique. I'm a unique manifestation of the divine. Then what happens to that? And the example that she states here, and I see it very, very frequently used, go back to our class 3, class 4 biology textbooks. Structure of a cell. The cell wall protects the cell, doesn't let foreign bodies enter. The nucleus, the brain of the cell, makes sure everything is working. The cytoplasm provides all the nutrients. The mitochondria is the powerhouse, and so on and so forth, right? Does the cell wall say, I'm more important than the nucleus when they are functioning? But we do it. Humans tend to do this. In an organization, be it pro bono, be it voluntary, be it paid, we are constantly trying to increase the energy or the benefit that we are getting and trying to state we are more important. And that's our human nature. So we can't hate ourselves for it. It's our human nature. But we have to accept we have this weakness. And then we have to strive to move forward. And in that striving is our growth. And doing work impersonally, trying to not focus on the rewards or the growth or the leadership or the perks, is a way towards that growth. So a lot of spirituality says give some time every day for impersonal work. Why? So for some time, we are not focused on what will I get out of this. The stress goes. We're just allowed to be, which is a part of what we need to be doing, but we forget. And if we can just do something for the joy of it, for the love of it, because it's something we want to spend our time on, see how calming it makes. It's a completely mindful experience. I think if we are able to reflect on our own journey of impersonal, voluntary work we did, people around us did, what happened, what can we do? So we get on that journey and help. Just do our small bit, because it is a small bit. Then imagine how much impact we can have without attaching ourselves to that impact. So, for me, it is do what you can, do if you can every day, do it with love, and don't get attached to it. Thank you. I request Dr. Bichlani to come in. Thank you so much.
When the mother advises us to do just one impersonal work every day, one is struck by the simplicity of the advice as well as the noble sentiment behind it. There's no difficulty in grasping that. And therefore, we at once seem to sort of feel so convinced about the value of this advice that we resolve that, yes, I shall try to follow it from now on. But then in today's session, what we have seen is that this apparently simple thing can get complex. And it gets complex for the same reasons for which everything simple gets complicated. The mother has said somewhere, life could be simple if only our mind did not introduce into it many unnecessary complications. And that is what happens also in this impersonal work. Now, put it in a very simple way, instead of getting into complexities, the difficulty in impersonal work is that it is difficult to forget the person, because there's a person also in the impersonal. Becomes difficult to forget the person. And why it becomes difficult to forget the person is that we have two conflicting urges planted in us. One is the urge to be an individual, to be separate. And the fact that we have individual needs is important. If one person doesn't get food, it is the one individual who dies. It doesn't affect others. That is a fact. So we are separate individuals. But then along with this separation, which has been planted in us, which we call the ego sense, which makes us pay exclusive attention to our own needs, we have also been what has been also planted in us is the urge to merge, the urge to become one with others, to express our concern for others. And that is what we call love. So in a way, we can say that both these principles, the principle of ego and that of love, have been planted in us. They are conflicting. Love is the antidote to the ego. And why that has been planted is because that is what helps us fulfill the purpose of human existence, which is spiritual growth. And the simplest sort of way one can put how we can grow spiritually is to express that love. And naturally, while we are expressing that love, ego takes a back seat. We express that love by giving what we have to those who need it. So that is essentially what love is about. But then, and that is what impersonal work also is, expressing our love for others by doing something which does not benefit us as individuals, at least no concrete and visible benefit. That is what we call impersonal work, say like volunteering in a school or a college or something like that, or in a hospital, volunteering somewhere and so on. Because from that we are getting no visible and concrete benefit, and yet we do it out of our concern for others. That is our expression of love for others, and we can express it in different ways depending upon what we can give. Some can give knowledge, some can give time, some can give physical care, some can give money, some can give an object, so whatever it is. So we give what we have. But then the difficulty comes in because Even in impersonal work, it's difficult to forget the person. Or if we call it unselfish work, the self in the unselfish tends to assert itself. So there is a self also in unselfish. And the way it perhaps happens is that when a person decides to do unselfish work, the self in the person thinks that it is the self that is doing something unselfish, and that is what leads to, and once again, the ego returning that it is me doing it, me is that little self in the unselfish. That is what happens, and that's how it again starts manifesting in different ways. As the mother says, that these difficulties come. One of the difficulties is that one tends to become the center of the universe. Even in unselfish work, gradually one feels that I am doing it. Or if it becomes a chain, then we become not just a link in the chain, but a link that tries to grow at the expense of the other links in the chain. Now all these difficulties come in because it is the self that continues to think that I am doing this unselfish work. Which means that the ego can come under many types of disguise. It can come camouflaged. Even in impersonal or unselfish work, it can come. And the fact that it comes, returns through the back door, if one might say, in subtle forms, does not mean that it is any less deadly than the ego which is quite visibly selfish. Because its becoming subtle only makes it more deadly. It grows in size as a result of it. It becomes giant-sized. It becomes more deadly and vicious because it is camouflaged, and therefore it's very easy for the person to cheat himself and convince himself that I'm doing something unselfish and continue believing that. So it is because of that that it can become even more dangerous than the ordinary ego. So then what is the way out of all this? The way out of it is all this is firstly to realize that impersonal work does not have to be necessarily what appears clearly impersonal. That can be brought into everything that we do. As Vidya brought out very nicely, that there can be two different types of doctors, and one is doing that extra bit, which is purely impersonal, but still has a great calming and therefore a healing effect on the patient. Now, this is something which anybody can bring into any type of work that we do. If we are a professional, as a doctor, as a nurse, as a teacher, or in any type of work that we are doing, if we bring in this element that firstly, I am not the person doing it, I am only instrument of the divine who has given me the abilities and the circumstances to do it. So that takes it a little away from being purely personal work and adds an impersonal element to it. Secondly, we try to do it to the best of our ability. Say if it is professional work for which we are being paid, that's not a sin because we all have to make a living, and even the professional work that the person is doing to make a living, that can get that touch of impersonality if the person keeps the money that the person is earning quite in one compartment and the work that he is doing in another compartment. It's not that this much work for this much money. Money, yes, that is important, but that is incidental. I need it, but then that meets some physical needs. For my survival, it is important. But then when it comes to work, I give my best. I put my heart and soul into it. I'm not trying to connect the two, this much work for this much money. Now, just doing that, doing my best, the way this doctor is doing, or the way a teacher might do by extending her love to children, by taking care of those things which is not strictly the call of duty, her duty as a teacher, when she does that, that impersonal element enters. If the person is not a professional, or even if the person is a professional, the person is doing other things, particularly in the family. Say as a spouse, as a child, as a parent, and so on and so forth. Now, in all these also, what we are doing can be done as a matter of duty, as a matter of responsibility, or as something which one is doing as an expression of love, out of a feeling of oneness with the person for whom you are doing it. So you do not feel you are doing it for that person is also me. And this happens most easily in case of children, particularly a mother. she has a tendency to treat the child as an extension of herself. So when she does something for the child, she does not feel that I am doing it for another person. She almost feels I am doing it for myself. Now, if this can be extended also to others within the family, at the workplace, other people whom we come in contact with, then one does not have to specifically do something which can clearly look impersonal, like say going and volunteering at a place. So in our professional work, we can introduce an element of impersonality. In our family life, we can introduce that element of impersonality. And that's how yoga can become a 24-hour yoga. That's how all life becomes yoga. So it is that which is important. And then, of course, one can move from there further and do it not only within, and these are not mutually exclusive, do it within the profession, do it within the family setting, do it at the workplace, and then do it at a place where you have no apparent clear-cut relationship, say in a hospital or in an ashram or in a school or anywhere, just volunteer time. You're doing it for unknown people with whom you start as strangers, and yet you feel a sense of oneness with them. At a spiritual level, since we are all one, doing it for those who are apparently unrelated to us otherwise acquires a greater spiritual significance. So that also one can do. So that is how one can keep moving from one type of impersonal work to another, and all these can be combined. And so in short, sort of what it comes to is that impersonal work is essentially an expression of our love for others based on a feeling of oneness. That is what occurs towards the end of Savitri, that what I call the Mahavakya of Savitri, which comes in the very last stanza of Savitri. To feel love and oneness is to live. The very purpose of life is served by living a life which is full of love, which has been inspired by oneness. That's what it means. To feel love and oneness is to live. So, impersonal work is a part of fulfilling that purpose of life. And then, through this, we grow not only as individuals, but also collectively. It contributes to collective growth. And Vidya has again brought that out very nicely, that one football coach doing impersonal work can produce another 100 football coaches. So that is how it can become collective. This is a very simple, I think, and gross way of understanding, instead of putting it in very complex terms, that you are raising the average consciousness of the human race by inspiring a few more also to work towards a rise in their consciousness and so on. That becomes more complex, but comes to the same thing essentially. Because what this coach did something impersonal, which was raising his consciousness, and the others who tried to imitate him were inspired by him. They also engaged in a process which started raising their individual consciousness. So the average goes up. But then this is, I think, a very simple way of putting it, how one flame can light another 100, one football coach can inspire another 100, one volunteer can inspire another 100 to volunteer. So this is how individual growth also leads to collective growth. But then what we have to be careful about is that we continue to feel ourselves a link in the chain and not try to become that bigger link which is trying to grow at the expense of other links. Now, if all these complications are there in impersonal work, does it mean that therefore what is the use? Any type of impersonal work is better than no impersonal work at all. Just as it said, any type of love is better than no love at all. One has to make a beginning somewhere, and we'll naturally make a beginning which is in spite of and irrespective of our weaknesses as human beings. So if we can do that, a beginning has been made, and that is how the weaknesses will go down and it will become more and more truly impersonal. And I'm not very sure whether I should touch that, because I don't even have an adhikara to say that, because I'm not at that level. But what will be the culmination of this? The culmination of this type of unselfish work or impersonal work would be that where this person or the self disappears from impersonal and unselfish. That is what the mother has called selfless work. a very subtle distinction between unselfish work and selfless work. In unselfish work, the self with a small s, still is intact, but you are ignoring that while doing the work. In selfless work, that self with a small s has disappeared and has become one with this s with a self with a capital S. So that is selfless work. And that is when these weaknesses will disappear. But then that is not a one time event. Yoga is a graded process, it is a step by step process. So we start with love, express that love through giving what we have to those who need it, do it in an impersonal way, do it in an unselfish way. Knowing the pitfalls of unselfish work, try to guard ourselves against those pitfalls from time to time. Remind ourselves that you don't have to caught in this trap. And if we continue with that sort of work, in that spirit, with that vigilance that I have to avoid these traps as much as possible, one day probably we'll also get to the level of the work becoming selfless. So that is the way we have to look at it. And in yoga, we are not in a hurry. We are not impatient. The aspiration is intense. The aspiration is persistent. The continuing of this journey, this is an important part of the sadhana through impersonal work. That should continue. But at the same time, we should know what the ultimate goal is. That gives us something to fix our gaze on, but we are not in a hurry to get there. If it takes 1,000 lives to do it, we are prepared for it. That is what the process of spiritual growth is about. So, any love is better than no love at all. And any impersonal work done in any context is better than no impersonal work at all. And if we look at it that way, it is relatively easy and less fraught with pitfalls to follow that simple advice of the mother: do at least one impersonal work every day.